What is good, everybody? Dexter Henry, your boy, host of New York Got Game, and we're bringing you a live edition of the show this week because we had a lot going on. We did a Liberty preview before they started the playoffs, and now today, on Monday, we got some big news surrounding the Knicks, some tough news for Knicks fans as we found out that Mitchell Robinson will not be ready for the start of this upcoming season. Media Day is Monday. Training camp opens next week, so basketball season's right around the corner. I know the Knicks fans are excited about this. I'm excited about this. And with all the buzz that was being talked about around this Mitchell Robinson injury news and a lot of feedback I got online talking to different people, I put a question out there. I was like, hey, what do you think the Knicks should do at center? Should they trade for a center ASAP? Because I know some of you guys are panicking out there. And a lot of interesting responses. And with that feedback, I said, you know what? It's time to do a live show. Time to do a live show for sure. And I thought it was time to bring on a guest and talk to somebody who, is very plugged in with the Knicks, does a great job in terms of content creation. You see him on with me a ton. New York Post Sports, S&Y. He is the Dean of Knicks Film School. It's my guy, Jonathan Macri, who joins me now. J-Mac, what's going on, man?
I appreciate those kind words, Dexter. Like you said, we are about a week out from when stuff is going to get started for real. But we got a little taste of the start of NBA season today. Not maybe the one we were hoping for, but certainly one that I think will give us some juicy stuff to dig into now.
Yeah, man. It's not the start that Knicks fans wanted at all. So I got to ask you this. I think we got to start off with this first. So when the news drops, you and I were talking about this a little bit. You hear this about Mitch, especially coming off the foot surgery that he had in May, and you hear this. What was your reaction to this and hearing that he will not be back to start the season? Might not see him till December, the earliest, maybe January, and that's still fluid. What was your reaction to all of this?
Surprised, not shocked. I mean, I think, you talk about being plugged in. Well, a lot of the beat reporters that actually cover this team full time, I feel like have been dropping little drips and drabs throughout the offseason about how Mitch might not be ready for the start of things. So you figure if they were hearing that over the course of the summer, and that meant he just wasn't 100% physically. So when the news came down today, my next thought after, again, being surprised but not shocked is, well, that's interesting. We'll talk about the timing and stuff, but like I have to think they knew about this for a while, or at least that Mitch was not going to be ready for a while, and the fact that they bypassed making a move, and we could talk about maybe some options that they may have had, says to me that at least to a certain extent, they believe in what they have. And it's also the timing is interesting. It's a week after Tibbs does this interview with NBA.com where he's talking about small ball and we're going to switch more and this and that. And as you said, we're a week out from training camp, which you can only hide from something like this for so long. So they kind of snuck it right in between those two things, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the timing, right, for sure, right, J-Mac? The timing of this is very interesting, particularly about, as you mentioned, the comments about Tibbs saying that, look, we might play some small ball. You might see Julius Randle at the 5. And a lot of fans were talking about that, right? A lot of people were interested in that. There are fans who wanted to see that. And I think it was a wrinkle the Knicks undoubtedly could use going forward. What did you think about Tibbs' comments around that now, especially in light of this Mitchell Robinson news that came out today?
I mean, even put the Mitch news aside. Let's pretend Mitchell Robinson was fully healthy. I think we were still going to be talking about small ball a lot because, like, Benji Ritholtz, so I know you've had on your show, we talked about it last week. And if the goal for an NBA team is to get your most talented players on the floor for the most possible minutes, and I don't mean this to sound disparaging towards Mr. Robinson, who is a very talented player and is very good at the things that he is very good at. But you talk about like the way the league is played today, trying to take down some of the top teams that have some more versatility. Obviously, I'm talking about Boston. You were going to need to lean into small ball to some extent anyway. Now with Mitch going down, it's not a question of if, but how much, how often, and opening night, are we seeing 20 minutes without a true center, 15, 25 more. Like any of these things, I think at this point are possibilities. So I found it interesting that Tibbs already laid the groundwork for that.
And we're going to get into more of this in this conversation because I thought the reaction, you shared your reaction, but the reaction I saw from fans was pretty mixed, right? Some people were like, okay, look, in terms of the question I posed, just to be clear, the question I posed about should the Knicks act on this? Should they go and trade for a center ASAP? Because free agent market, we know, pretty dry, right?
Yeah.
The reaction is pretty mixed. Some folks were like, hey, the Knicks should have done more earlier if they knew more about this. They should have acted early in the free agent market. My question to those people would be, well, what were the realistic options with what they could have done there? I'm not sure it was that realistic for them to go out and get somebody that would have sufficed. And we'll get into some names in a second because I know people are going to say Dex Walker Kessler is out there, who I think is a good fit, but what's the price? We're going to get into that. So hold on. I'm going to hold on that. But then there's some fans who are saying, well, I think with this news, the Knicks are going to be patient here. And that was kind of my response. I think that is. And I think the response you've heard from the Knicks or what they're putting out about this is that they will be patient. I don't think they're going to rush this. I don't think they're going to try to say, okay, let's panic. Let's make a move right now. I don't get the vibe. Do you think that's the right play for them, J-Mac, in terms of how they should play this? And I guess the second part of the question I ask you is, based on what you've seen from this front office, do you trust them to do the right thing here?
It's not February 1st right now, right? I haven't checked my calendar, but it's not February 1st. If we were sitting here and we were having a conversation on February 1st, or even, whatever, the middle of January or something like that, where we are, like, the trade deadline is in our immediate sights, you could sit here and talk to me all you want about patience, assuming this season goes even remotely like the Knicks are hoping it will go, which is that they're going to, win a decent number of games. Then patience goes out the window, because the days of like, it would be nice if maybe we were competitive in the playoffs this year, but really it's not. No, those days are done. You send however many first round picks you send to Brooklyn for Mikal Bridges. Those days are over. Now you go into the season with, even if you're not the favorite, and I don't think they're the favorite, but like, your goal is an NBA championship. At the very least, you want to, make it to the conference finals or whatever the case may be. So, but we're not there. It's September. So I think that, like, look, if they didn't have like a warm body on the roster who was capable of playing NBA center minutes, that would be one thing. But like, they have Precious Achiuwa, they have Jericho Sims. I'm not saying either of those guys is the answer to the tune of like, oh yeah, they're, give them 25 minutes a night, they'll be fine. Neither of those guys have proven they have the ability to be a full-time, even reserve center, honestly. Precious more than Sims, but even if you want to, say glass half empty on Precious and you still have your doubts, that's fine. But between them, between small ball as an option, I think there's enough there that they could be patient enough at least to get into the season. Now, if we're sitting here December 15th and they're, I don't know how many games they will have played by them, but 10 and 15, I'm going to look pretty ridiculous. I don't think that's what's going to happen though. Like, might there be a game or two that they lose where we look at it and be like, oh, if they had a better center, that might have turned out differently. Sure, it's possible, but I think they want to see what they have, and I think that's a reasonable approach. Especially when, and you kind of, you mentioned Kessler before, when you think about maybe some of the other names that are out there on the center market who are actually worth getting. Well, like, the prices for those guys in the offseason traditionally is high. Like, there's a reason why a lot of deals get made closer to the deadline. So I'm fine with them being patient, see how it goes, and then reassess the situation in December or January, which, by the way, is when Mitchell Robinson is supposed to come back. So, I think it makes sense.
All right. Now, we're going to dive into more of that. And look, I see. Thanks, everybody tapping in, watching, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching. We appreciate you. And I want to get some of the fan reactions that we're seeing here and comments on YouTube. Here's one we have from Benji. We're stacked outside the center, but we have to address this issue immediately, ideally in the next 2 to 3 weeks. J-Mac, Benji's out here wanting things to get done immediately before the season starts. This is some of what I saw from some of the fans responding to me on social media. I don't see the Knicks doing anything in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I don't see them panicking here.
Well, let's say the Knicks agreed with you, Benji, and let's say the Knicks felt more of a sense of urgency than they are letting on. And like, it's not a coincidence that all the beat reporters tweeted out some version of the same sentiment, because that, like, we know where that comes from. Like, the Knicks are putting forth a strong front and saying that, like, we'll be okay. Let's say the Knicks didn't believe that. And let's say the Knicks secretly were like, oh my God, Jericho Sims, Precious Achiuwa, who are we kidding here? We need to go out and get a real center. Why in God's name would they not have done that before releasing this news? Like, I shouldn't say release. This story,
Right.
They didn't say anything, but like, the story broke. You knew it was going to break pretty soon before camp. And because they weren't going to be able to keep this tight-lipped until like after media day, because obviously you're going to get asked about it and so on and so forth. They would have done something, because I would wager any amount of money that they did not find out today that Mitchell Robinson is going to be gone until December or January. No. Like, they've known this for a while. So if they're like, shoot, this news is going to, come out, or we're going to have to let it out because of media day and everything, they would have made the move before that, because by trying to make a move after this news has come out, the price is only going to get higher. All that being said, I don't think that there was ever a trade this summer that they looked at and they're like, we could maybe that maybe is in our price range, because if that trade was out there, they would have done it. We know from the reporting that they have kicked tires on different centers. We know we've said Kessler's name a few times now. We know they at least barked up that tree a little bit. To what extent, we don't know. James Edwards III, new reporter for The Athletic for the Knicks, mentioned Isaiah Stewart, but again, I don't know how much we want to get into the nitty gritty here. Any avenue you go down that involves trading for a center, whether if it's a low salary center, you're probably talking about sending out Deuce McBride. Do the Knicks want to send out, one of their key rotation players, or a guy who is like, if someone goes down with an injury, he could step in and play major minutes? He's also on a dirt cheap contract for a team that's trying to stay under the second apron for the next few years. I'm not so sure. If it's a higher salary center, well, then you're going to have to send out Mitch, which means two things. One, you're sending Mitchell Robinson out at the absolute lowest, the nadir of his value. Mitchell Robinson will never be worth less around the league than he is today. That's number one. And number two, you also don't get the benefit of Mitchell Robinson when he comes back, presumably from injury, at some point this year. Now, if they secretly have their doubts about, like, I don't know if Mitch is ever going to play a game again, maybe they'd be more willing to do that. I'm going to choose to take them at their word, again, through the reporting. They're saying we're confident he's going to be okay and he'll be fully recovered. I'll take them at their word for that. So, again, I like, they have the best, I don't know about the best, one of the two or three, if you're talking about positions 1 through 4, and the top 6, their top end depth, presumably the starting lineup, plus Hart and DiVincenzo off the bench. That 6 and their versatility, two-way play, the whole thing is as good as any top 6 in the league. So to rest on that and feel like that is going to be able to get us through the rough patch with our centers, I think that that's fine, especially when you're going to be paying through the nose for someone based on, and what you're going to have to give up by way of assets. That guy may not even be all that good. I don't see it. I don't see it making sense.
Nah, I'm with you there. I'm going to get to one other question here that comes from my colleague Ryan Sampson. He said, defensively, how can the Knicks, handle Embiid, the Bucks, the Celtics without their big man defensive center for the first 30 to 40 games? Fair question here against those teams where it could be a bit of a matchup problem. Now, I do want to know, and J-Mac, I think you might rock with me on this. The Celtics, you got to remember, they're going to be without Porzingis for much of that same time. How much are they going to be able to run Al Horford out there at center? And I think the Knicks, that's a perfect team for them to play small ball against and match up very well with. Embiid, look, it's tough. But we did see in game 4 against Philadelphia in the first round, we saw Tom Thibodeau go with Precious Achiuwa to guard Embiid down the stretch. We saw some OG Anunoby and Precious Achiuwa, and the Knicks fared very well there. And that was without a Mikal Bridges. So are you concerned about how they match up with these teams over the first 30 to 40 games, like Ryan asked? Or are you kind of like, they'll be all right. They'll survive?
Well, in terms of the Celtics, you could argue to me that the best lineups to play against the Celtics for 48 minutes don't contain a center, like you just alluded to. So I am absolutely, we are of one mind on that. You're going to come up against a center that creates an issue, whether it's Embiid, whether it's Brook Lopez and Giannis, those two big bodies from Milwaukee, or out west. Obviously, there's, if you face a Minnesota, they have a lot of size, or Denver, obviously, with Jokic. Thankfully, the league today is not the league of, I was going to say like 30, 40 years. It's not even a league of like 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. It's a very different league. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but like, if there was a center out there who would make a meaningful #meaningful difference for the Knicks specifically in the matchup against Joel Embiid, and that person was attainable for a price that they were like, was not going, either they could pay or that they were comfortable paying, whichever way you want to look at it, they would have gone out and gotten that player already. Like, they're going to have to get creative, but I think that's why you have to, at least to some extent, have faith in your coach. And the fact that this guy's been around for a very long time, he's more creative than he gets credit for. And the best coaches are able to take another, what is perceived as a weakness and turn it into a strength. So if you have a Joel Embiid or a Nikola Jokic, or even like a Brook Lopez or whoever on the other side of the floor, well, maybe we are going to take the fact that you have a more traditional center, and we're going to use that against you, and we're going to put you in some compromising positions with what we are able to do on offense. And I'm not saying that doesn't come with trade-offs. Obviously, it comes with trade-offs. Otherwise, every team would always play small. But they have some moves that they could make here. And I think how often they go to those alignments and against whom they use those alignments is going to be very telling as we move forward here.
Now, with all that being said, J-Mac, one of the things, as you know, from all the content you do, and you knew this from the offseason, once Isaiah Hartenstein left for OKC, everybody was like, all right, got concerns about the Knicks center depth. I was just on a podcast last week, myself and shout out to CP the Franchise, Knicks Fan TV. We're on a podcast together, and that came up, right? Like, what are you guys concerned about the Knicks center depth? And I then last week I said, it's there on record, I said, okay, slightly concerned. My concern level was maybe like 3, 4, right? Like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10. I think the Knicks will be patient and do what they need to do. Where were you before this news in terms of your concerns about the center depth for the Knickerbockers? And has it changed? If I'm saying I was a 3, 4, okay, now I might be at a 5, 6. I'm not in panic mode, guys. But J-Mac, where were you on this before, and where are you now in terms of concerns about center depth for the Knickerbockers?
I was probably at about a 3, and now I'm probably about where you are, about a 6. And the reason is because for any opportunities that this may open up, and I'm again trying to spin this positive, even though my heart breaks for Mitch, because he's a great guy and I like to see him be successful. Like, for whatever opportunities this opens up for them to play smaller, for them to maybe do more switching, for all that great stuff, Mitchell Robinson, you knew if you put him out there, he was going to give the other team hell for however long he was playing. If it was 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, his ability to wreak havoc on the offensive glass, his ability to disrupt, pick and rolls, and obviously his rim protection, those are all elite things that he brings to the table. And now you're not going to have any of them. So just cobbling together 48 minutes of adequate center play is going to be more of a challenge. And I think what it's going to require you to do and I'm kind of cheating on the answer here, it's going to require you to look for answers outside of the center position, which is to say, like, okay, let's say you have to play Jericho Sims for 15 minutes a night, what are you able to do around him that insulates him from maybe whatever deficiencies he has? And to a lesser extent, Precious Achua, because I think, like, here's the thing about Achua, and I want to go off on a tangent here. I think there's enough still there with Achua where, and again, I know like Toronto often tried like switching everything, and that didn't always work. I'm excited to see what he's capable of, given a real opportunity, because that guy, not all the time, but a lot of the time when he was given more opportunity last season, he seemed to come up really big. And I would argue that he never was surrounded by as much talent as he's going, and functional talent that I think could complement his strengths. I don't think he was ever surrounded by that much talent when he came here last year. So I'm excited to see that. And again, I'm excited to see how do they lean into the strengths of the centers that they have, because I do think Achua, and to maybe slightly lesser extent Sims, I think these guys do have strengths. So how can you unlock that? How can you make them the best players they could be?
Yeah, I do think they have strengths, and I'm going to get into them in a second in terms of their ability to step up. But I'm gonna move to the question and put this open to everybody, including Jonathan, right now. This is the question I asked on Twitter: should the Knicks trade for a center ASAP? Now, people can say, "What do you mean by ASAP?" Yes, as soon as possible, right? Before the start of the season is what I'm saying. I think that, and you kind of alluded to this, J Mac, the market is going to be what the market is. And if the Knicks show their hand and say, oh man, we've got to get a center, everybody's going to know that. And the price is going to go up on Walker Kessler and everybody else. I will say this. I don't think it's detrimental if the Knicks play the first, I'm not going to go 30, 40 is what Ryan just brought up. 25 games. Maybe they give it a look at Sims and Achua and see what they have here. I guess in me, and I'm trying to save this for where we're going to go next, but I guess what I'll ask you and put it on this in terms of ASAP, because neither of us think they should do this before the season. Neither of us think that this will happen before the season. But how long is it before the level of where we're at a 6, right, J-Mac, gets to maybe, let's say 8. 8 is where we're talking about panic mode on a scale of 1 to 10. How long before you think it gets to the point where you're like, this doesn't look good and they have to absolutely go out and do something about this?
So I'm going to answer your question in a couple different ways. First thing I'll point out, December 15th actually falls in the middle of the midseason, or the mid-season tournament. What do they call it now? The in-season tournament, the whatever
in-season tournament, NBA Cup.
NBA Cup. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. So they will have played 24 games before December 15th, probably 25 if you factor in the first NBA Cup game. So you nailed it. You said 25 games.
Yeah.
Me personally, I don't think there's any chance, barring a slew of injuries, I don't think there's any chance we're going to be sitting here and looking at a team that's 10-15 after 25 games. Is there a chance that there's something like 10-15, or sorry, 15-10? Yeah, that's within reason. If they were, for argument's sake, sitting here at 15-10 or even like 14-11, something like that, yeah, I think then the urgency level would be closer to an 8 or a 9, especially when it's tough because, like, if you look at their schedule, there's a lot of different ways to look at their schedule and like pick apart what's the hard parts, what are the easy parts. So I don't want to get into that too much, but the other part of the answer here is anytime you're talking about trading for someone, you got to talk about who.
Yes.
And so just like looking at the league right now, there are 8 teams in the East, and I would argue 13 teams or 12 teams in the West. I'm not counting San Antonio because I don't think San Antonio is like gung-ho going for it this year. I think they're going to be just good because they have Wembanyama and they're going to win games that way. So let's call it 20 teams, 12 in the West, 8 in the East, that are trying pretty vociferously to win games. That's 2/3 of the league. So right off the bat, like you're not getting a quality center from those teams for like it's just not going to happen right now. Like those teams want to go into the year, they want to see what they have. And then you look at the rest of the league and you look at what's available and you start to get into okay, well, what would it cost to get some of these guys? So like Kessler, if I don't know what the price of Kessler was before today, but whatever it was, it went up.
Yes. Yesterday's price is not today's price for Walker Kessler at all whatsoever. It's not the case.
And that's because Walker Kessler is really freaking good. And Walker Kessler is a guy who is good enough that he could be like, I'm sure they were thinking about him as a potential foundational piece, you know, for years to come, even putting aside Mitchell Robinson. So like someone of that caliber, you're not just going to be able to go out there and get with what you have. And then you look at some of the other names and yeah, you could put together some fake trades, but like you're dealing oftentimes with a salary issue. Again, I'm not going to bore all of your listeners with like cap mechanics, but the Knicks cannot make a trade in which they send out more salary than they take back, which means if you want to go trade for, again, just throwing a name out there, if you want to go trade for Clint Capella, I think is due like 22 point something $million this season.
Correct.
So you're talking about, all right, well, Mitch for sure. Plus, Deuce, plus a minimum. And I'm not even sure that gets you there. They could package together multiple minimums after December 15th. I'm not going to go any more into that because again, don't want to put everybody to sleep. But like the salary issue is gonna pop up here. Plus the issue of like, all right, well, is it worth it to give up all of these pieces for a guy who, like, is this going to be a starting center if we're in the Eastern Conference Finals? Are we going to feel confident playing this guy 20, 25, 30 minutes a night if we get to where we want to go? And I think the more you look at some of these teams and the potential centers that they could have to offer, I think pretty clearly you're going to run into some issues unless you want to really shake up your team and get into like fake Julius Randle trades, which I don't have the bandwidth for right now, and I don't think anybody else wants to hear about those either.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of times when you hear this and I've seen the fans, talk about it, it's like, all right, we got to make a move. Who is the important question? Who and how, right? Those are the important questions here. Who, what's the money going to be? Look, do I think Walker Kessler would be a fantastic fit here in New York? Yes, he fits in the timeline. He's young enough, but he's a really good player. What is the Jazz direction going here? Are they trying to make the playoffs? They re-signed Lauri Markkanen. How are they trying to build around him? That remains to be seen. Also, guys, Danny Ainge. That's all I got to say. Yeah. It's Danny Ainge. We understand how he operates. We understand these things and how it goes. So I think you're right about that, J-Mac. It's a lot about, the who in terms of what they're going to get. But people, let us know. What do you think? Who do you think the Knicks should get if and when they decide to make a move for center? Let us know what you think. Got my guy Tommy Cohen. Shout out to Tommy, a big Syracuse football fan, out here checking in. He said, should the Knicks have prioritized re-signing Isaiah Hartenstein? Guys, Tommy, J-Mac, you want me to take this?
It's up to you. I mean, Leon Rose, if he had the ability to cut off his pinky toe to bring back, he would have. And I'm sure the rest of the front office would have been right there with him. There was no way for them to get to that money. There was just no function. It was impossible. It was not possible.
Unless iHeart had decided to take a lot less, which I do not blame him for. He got his bag, right? It is what it is. Listen, and I'll say this, and maybe there's some Knicks fans that haven't. I feel like you've explained it a ton. I've seen you and Jeremy explain it a ton on Knicks Film
School. Tried.
That's why I know you're tired. I hear you. The Knicks went and got Bridges, which is a fantastic. And I know there's concern about rim protection. I get all that. But I think Fred Katz, when he was the beat writer still at The Athletic and now senior NBA writer, shout out to Fred, he made a fantastic point, I thought, early in free agency in saying that, like, look, I understand you want depth at the 5. I understand rim protection is a concern for some of the fans. But is it as important when you have wings, really phenomenal, elite defensive wings who can stop people from getting to the basket? maybe it's not as important or paramount. I'm not saying it's not important at all when you've got guys who can stop others from getting to the basket. So I think that's something. I think it's a really interesting point by Fred, especially the way the league is going, as you know, J-Mac, and how things are. So yeah, I think I won't say Tommy. I think all Knicks fans would have loved iHeart to be back, but I'm not sure they should have prioritized it or done anything. I don't think there's no failing of the Knicks in the fact that iHeart didn't come back. It was a matter of financial circumstance, and that's it. Go ahead, J-Mac.
The one name that I want to throw out because his name came up, Brian Windhorst of ESPN brought him up in connection with the Knicks. I think it was last week or the week before, whatever it was, is Robert Williams on Portland. And the reason I bring up Robert Williams is because if you're looking for an archetype of a Tibbs center, I mean, really very much like Mitchell Robinson with a little bit more polish on his offensive game, it's Robert Williams. I had poo-pooed the idea, to put it to for lack of a better term, of a Robert Williams trade when that rumor came out, because again, not to put everybody to sleep, but the only way to functionally make a Robert Williams trade work under the cap would have been either to include Deuce plus Precious plus a minimum, which I didn't think they were really going to do, or to trade Mitchell Robinson. And it didn't make any sense to me. Why would you trade Mitch for a guy that has been even more injury prone than Mitchell Robinson?
Yes.
And you could argue by a considerable degree over the course of his career. I do wonder how this impacts all of that. And I should say, I'm not sure that for all of Mitch's issues now with his health, I'm not sure Robert Williams is going to start the season healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if we got to Portland's media day and their coaches were like, hey, we're not sure when he's going to be ready. The other issue there is a straight up trade, even if the Knicks are throwing something in to sweeten the pot, which again, I don't know that they'd want to do, is the whole reason why the Blazers are trying to get rid of Robert Williams is because they have too many centers. So the notion of a Robert Williams for Mitchell Robinson trade straight up just leaves it kind of doesn't alleviate anything for the Blazers. And I don't think the Knicks are planning on throwing in any kind of a draft pick that would make it so worth their while. I could be wrong, but that is a name that I would at least keep in the back of my mind.
Yeah, my thing with Robert Williams, I think when I first heard that report from Brian Windhorst, I was like, yeah, all right, so the Knicks want to get another center, as you just mentioned, that is as banged up, if not more. Is this what you want to go back to? I've trepidation. I see how he fits in the Tibbs system. I totally get it. It's just it's the injury history, and I'm just like, don't know if you want to go there. To the point you made earlier, which I think is a fantastic one, in terms of when the Knicks should be aggressive, and even if you're looking 20 to 25 games, and right now, 2/3 of the league, believes they can compete for the playoffs, right? And they're trying to win. So, everybody's great. We're going to hear a lot of this next week. Everybody's in the best shape of their life.
Yeah.
They're going to hear a lot of that next week. Everybody believes they can win. You get it, but you will see. I'm on the Knicks do not need to panic here train. I don't think they need to panic. I don't think this is the thing. But I think the next thing is, and we've kind of talked about around this a little bit about it, is okay, if you're not going to panic, now it's time for Jericho Sims and Precious. Yeah. And all right, they can step up. I think one of the things, J-Mac, and you and I have talked about this sometimes off camera whenever we're recording something, I think internal development sometimes isn't valued as much in a lot of sports, and you don't know where that comes from. Now, people bear with me. And J-Mac, I know you've seen this. We've seen workout videos from Jericho Sims. I sometimes can hate the workout videos. Everybody, we saw Mitchell Robinson shooting threes a couple years ago. So I'll pump the brakes on the workout videos. But I've heard some good things from people that work with Jericho Sims and stuff, that he's progressing and developed his game. Do you think both of these guys are ready to step up and give quality minutes at the center position for the Knicks, if need be, this season?
I have more faith in Achua, and maybe this is recency bias, but DJ Zulu, who does amazing work for us at Knicks Film School, put out a clip package of Game 4 of the Phillies series. specifically on Precious Chew. I think he put it out on his birthday because it was last week. He turned 25. Happy birthday, Precious. And the guy that you saw in that clip package, that guy could play 30 minutes a night at center against any team in the league and be fine. So the thing that I'm looking for from Precious Achua is consistency. Can he bring a certain degree of play with him to the floor each and every night? And that may seem like a lot to ask, but like, honestly, it wasn't that long ago that we were asking the same thing of Mitchell Robinson, where we're like, hey, Mitch, we love the flashes, big guy. It's awesome to see the flashes. Can you do it consistently? And it wasn't until this year, finally, that we got it. And then, of course, he goes down with the injury in December, which is what made it such a shame because he was finally playing at an all-defense caliber level. He got to that point after having so many reps and having so much consistency in one organization after a lot of years. And, after several years under Tibbs, Achua hasn't had that. He was obviously traded from Miami. He had different coaches in Toronto. Then he got traded to the Knicks. Like, this is a guy that's been through a lot. So the fact that we have not seen that level of consistency from him yet, I'm far from out on him. I think there's a lot more there. I think he could get more consistent. So I think he could step up more. As for Sims, again, there are things that Sims is good at. I don't know that he's, how do I put this lightly? I don't know that he's good enough at anything to ever get to the point where you feel really comfortable and confident playing him like significant minutes, but they may not need to play him significant minutes. They may only need him for like 10 minutes a night, if that. So, I think that's kind of where I'm at. And look, again, he's done that already. We've seen him give 10 or 8, 10, 12 good minutes to the team. I'm thinking back to not even last year, 2 years ago, when I don't know if you remember, when they were sitting at 10 and 13, and then they rolled off, I think it was 8 straight games.
Yep.
That was when they had Sims actually starting at the 4, right?
If I started at the 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Starting at the 4. Not an ideal position. And yet they put him out there. He did what he had to do. They kept winning games, and he wasn't losing games for them. So I think that's really what it comes down to is like, what can you do to make sure you're not costing your team the game? And then maybe if we progress past that point, what could you do to make sure you help your team win the game?
What I wonder if there's this world, J-Mac, where the Knicks get off to a good start. I'm going to say 25 game mark is where I usually like to evaluate a team, right? That's why I threw that out there. And
it's a good spot.
It's a good spot, right? I think it's a fair sample size of what you've seen from the team. What if they are 18-7?
Oh, well,
okay. Right. I want to, right. And you
where do I sign up for?
Where do you sign? I got you. Where do you sign right now for that? Right. What if they're 18-7 and you're looking at this? And I want to be clear. I want to be very specific about the situation. Looking at this, you're saying, hey, Precious Tua looks good. I'm going to even put the number that J-Mac just said here. He looks good at 30 minutes a night. He's not hurting the team. He's playing good defensively. Opened up his offensive game. He's hitting the corner 3, which would help a little bit. Right? Sims isn't hurting you too. They might look so good together. You might be like Mitchell Robinson, who? I won't go. That might be going a little too far. That's going a little too far. I know. It's going a little too far. But there's a world where that could happen and they could look competent and they've won enough games. And I wonder how the fan base is going to feel if something like that occurs.
I mean, a perfect world, it honestly probably wouldn't be that dissimilar from what we experienced at the end of last year when Isaiah Hartenstein stepped into the starting role and looked, I mean, talk about looking the part. I mean, that guy, the guy made himself $90 million
yes, he did.
with how he looked. And I don't say that like flippantly because I had, when I talked to Bobby Marks on my pod, like, at the trade deadline last year. And look, Bobby's not only just having great knowledge of the sport, but like he's still pretty locked, like clued in around the league and knows what people are talking about. He's like, yeah, where's the team that's going to give Hartenstein more than the mid-level? He's like, the view at that time was, maybe the Knicks have to pay over that to keep him. Maybe they have to go to the full early bird number. Nobody was thinking that he would get this kind of crazy offer.
Yeah.
So I think and again, we're talking about a perfect world, right? In our perfect world, Precious Achua or maybe Sims, I don't want to count out Sims, looks so good that they are that Mitchell Robinson coming back is seen as like, oh, look at this luxury that we have now to throw out there for 8 minutes a half and really disrupt what other teams are trying to do. Maybe not every game against every team in every matchup, but a lot of games in a lot of matchups. If that's the case, though, Dexter, I bet you a donut that a big part of why they're whatever it is, 18-7, is because the small ball thing is clicking. And it is real. It is not a parlor trick. And teams don't know how to exploit it defensively enough to overcome how destructive that unit is going to be on offense. Because if it's one thing I think we could all sit here and agree upon right now, and this is maybe the thing that should help the most people who are distraught about the Mitch injury. I don't think there is any universe where you could look at this team and be like, oh yeah, the best offensive version of this team has Mitchell Robinson on the floor. Those days are done. Those days when we looked at Mitchell Robinson's offensive rebounding as like, oh, how are they going to score without Mitch grabbing offensive boards? Like, we're so far past that now between Brunson and Randall and all these wings and all the shot making that they could put on the floor and the 3-point shooting and just having all these wing players who are threats to do basically everything. So if that's the best offensive version of their team, then it's going to be on other teams to force them to take that lineup off the floor, either through physicality or just that they're gonna poke holes at it defensively. And I don't know about you, even without a true center, I don't see a whole lot of teams out physicaling the Knicks. If you're telling me we're going to have Julius Randle and OG Anunoby and probably Josh Hart on the floor. And I also don't know that I'm really like, yeah, Randall at the 5. He's not going to be playing the 5. It's going to be OG playing the 5. But like, you have Randall out there, you have Jalen Brunson out there, not the best defenders. You still got all those wings. And what can you do? How can you deploy those wings defensively? Again, you referenced what Benji said. How much do you need a rim protecting center if teams don't get to the rim?
Right.
That's going to be the challenge. That's going to be the biggest challenge. And if we're sitting here and they are looking good after 20, 25, 30 games, I have to think that group is really clicking.
Yeah, I think there's reason for optimism there. Just want to get to a couple people who've been commenting in the chat. Ed Santana, I see you. Ed Santana is going deep into the roster right here. How about Ariel Hukporti? How about giving him a shot? Now, I will say this. Hukporti was, after Tyler Kolek, and I was out at Summer League this year, looked really good. I can see things in his game the Knicks will try to develop, and I could see him trying to be in that sort of that Hartenstein role. I am not saying he's ready for that yet. Just to be clear, I'm not saying he's ready for that. There are things in his game I could see. He's a pretty solid passer. He can do some things the Knicks need there. I don't know if Hukporti is ready. Ed Santana also mentioned Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard back to the NBA. J-Mac is not here for this.
Can we get Kyle O'Quinn back? If we're doing far more than Dwight Howard, let's get Kyle O'Quinn back.
Kyle O'Quinn. Shout out to Kyle O'Quinn. And then
Kyle
Rob
O'Quinn
Clark
is still playing ball overseas, just for anybody who may be wondering.
Yeah, shout out to Rob Clark checking in as well, too. He said, all respect again, if you want playoffs, and Precious and Sims are good. Championship, need another center. Okay. Rob, I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with you. It's a process. We can just try to get through the first. Can we get through 25 games? That's all I'm saying. Can we get through 25 games? And I'm not saying they don't need to level up. I'm not saying anything. You're right, Rob. Don't disagree with you, bro. But it's a process. That's it. We
Dex, I completely agree with where you're coming at on this one. This to me is the most interesting question. Is because it's not like before we found out this news that we didn't have collectively concerns about Mitchell Robinson's ability to be a starting center on a championship level team. Those concerns existed before today. They still exist now. But it's all the more this injury to me, and maybe I'm taking crazy pills. This injury is all the more reason to exercise patience, see what you have on the team now, And then once you get more evidence of what small ball looks like, what Precious looks like, what Sims look like, when Mitch could come back, how Mitch looks when he comes back, all of those different things. Once you get all that evidence, then as you get closer to the trade deadline, let's see what's out there, and let's see if there's a move that's actually worth making that isn't made out of desperation, that is made from a position of like, okay, we know what our last piece is. Now it's a matter of whether we can go get it or not.
Yeah, I think a couple things you said there is important, right? Evidence and information. Those things matter. And that's what the regular season is for, to try to help gather some of those things. And that's why I understand the concern. And this is where I'm with you, Rob, but not saying that Rob is panicking, because I understand the point he's making. But it's like, yeah, I think they're going to work to that. I think he's right. And if they want to get to that championship level, there will need to be some tweaks, and we'll see if they make those tweaks. I think this is one thing we talk about is, okay, now that you've seen this Robinson injury, does it change expectations for the Knicks? I didn't look at any betting odds. I did not see if the over-under win total line changed with this Robinson injury. It was at 53.5 in most books before. I did not look and check and see if that's changed. So anybody, if you've seen it change, let me know. It doesn't change expectations for me, J-Mac. As somebody, who's, as a journalist covering the team, you creating great content around the team, has it changed your expectations? Because I know you're pretty positive coming into the season for this Knicks team. You thought they could do great things. Where were you in terms of expectations?
For the season as a whole, it hasn't changed them.
Yeah.
I think there was some thought that this team was going to go out there and win like 60 games. I think that is going to be more challenging. I know I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because there's a lot of exciting things that this team could do if they go small. And I'm a believer in Precious, and to a lesser extent in Sims, all that's well and good, but you're always going to do better when you have more pitches in your arsenal. And they lost a pretty important pitch, that they had the ability to throw at teams, just just to have Mitch in there on nights where nothing's going your way. Great. He could pull down 8 offensive rebounds. He could deter everything at the rim for the other team. That stuff matters. So my win total, I think I already took the Knicks under. I think it was at 53.5. I was more at 51, 52. Now I think I would probably sign for 50 wins and a top 4 seed, as opposed to hey, let's try to get the number 1 seed or the 2 seed. To me, get into top 4, ideally top 3, top 4 at the very least, and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think I had the Knicks. I was asked the other day. I had them at 55 wins before this news. Does it change expectations for me? No, I thought they'd be a contending team in the East. I still think they will be. I also will say I don't have any reason to believe, based on what I've seen from the front office in the last couple of years, that they won't figure it out. If there's a need, I think they will go out and address that need. I also think we should credit the front office for the last couple of years making moves, I would say way before, sometimes 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks before the trade deadline.
You could say way before.
Way before. They've made great value moves. I mean, you were there with me when the OG Anunoby trade went down. We were together when that happened. That was a move before the deadline. I think they've been able to identify value in players that fit the system, and that's where I kind of don't understand the panic from some of the Knicks fans here. They've shown competence. This isn't your old Knicks. I don't want to get all Philadelphia here, but you can trust the process, man. you can trust the process a little bit here and see what's going down. And so, yeah, I'm with you. It hasn't changed that much expectations for me, right? I think the range of 50 wins to maybe I'll drop down. I'll say 53. I see. I can see that. Let's see what happens. I hope we're right and they're playing good. I hope through 25 games they're 18-7. Because if they hit that number, I'm going to be pulling up the receipts from this show.
Please.
I'm going to do that, J-Mac. I'm pulling up the receipts.
Again, where do I sign? Happily sign for that.
A couple more things before we wrap. As you look at this roster now with this news, do you have any other concerns about this roster? Because a lot of the talk was about the 5. It's funny. Last year, the talk was, do we have a backup four? Remember when people were talking about that?
Yeah.
Knicks fans saying, do we have a backup four? And then that showed to not really be a concern at all. What are your other Knicks roster concerns, if you have any, J-Mac? I don't know if you have any. Do you have any concerns about this Knicks roster as we head into training camp?
No, not concerns. No, I don't have any concerns. I'm not going to try to make one up. I just, like a lot of people, I found it interesting that they signed Campaign as their first kind of vet minimum signing in the summer. And, he went off the market pretty quick-ish, so to speak. And obviously they drafted Tyler Kolek. So they have two guys now that they like to varying degrees, and that play the backup point guard position. And I don't think Deuce is going anywhere. I think they value Deuce. I think they really like Deuce. I think they like Deuce's versatility. I think they like the fact that he is not a traditional backup point guard and that he could play, he could start at shooting guard if you need him to. He could play backup shooting guard if he could do a lot of things. And ultimately, I think he's more valuable to the Knicks than he is to any other team. I'm curious if his name comes up in trade rumors at any point during the year, whether it's for a center or just otherwise, because, it's about maximizing the what you have on the roster. And I wonder, is there another team out there that values him more than the Knicks? Frankly, I'm not sure that there is, because I really do think the Knicks love him. But like last season, we saw a team look at Emmanuel quickly and be like, oh, there's a guy that's going to be our starting point guard for the next decade. We're ready to pay him $35 million a year. And obviously that's how they got OG Anunoby. Again, I'm not saying that team there's a team out there looking at Deuce that way, but I'm just, something I have my eye on. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's something to have your eyes on there. I think it's a good thing that you're talking about that backup point guard spot. It'll be interesting to watch Tyler Kolek in training camp. Can he push for that spot? Listen, everybody has criticized Tibbs. Not everybody, but some segments of Knicks fan base criticized Tibbs for not playing young players. I've always felt that's been harsh. Look at the opportunity he gave Quickly when Quickly played very well in training camp 3 years ago. So it wouldn't shock me if that happens. I think that's something to definitely keep an eye on. If Tyler Kolek outplays Campaign, I think you could see Kolek maybe steal some minutes here and there. I think you can see a lot of Deuce on playing off the ball with that second unit. So we'll see. I like the bench. I like the roster flexibility. I want to get to one more comment here that we see here. Not a true username here, but the panic is that we didn't fill the iHeart spot. Now we don't have Roby. It's bad, bro. Here's my question back. Roby. I'm assuming that's Mitchell Robinson. Never heard anybody call him that.
Yeah.
Robinson. I assume that, but okay.
I'm a little slow on the uptake.
Everybody, for the people in the we didn't fill the iHeart spot camp, who were you going to fill that with? That's my question. Who's the player that you were going to fill that with as this team tried to keep their cap flexibility, stay below the second apron? Who's that player that was out there? That's the only question I want to know. Who's the player? I can't even think of one that would suffice for what this particular segment of Knicks fan base wants.
So the one thing that I've heard a lot today is that why didn't they draft the center? As far as I could tell, there are two centers right now who look like they are ready. Well, I shouldn't make any assumptions. Who I think people are assuming are going to step in and play significant NBA minutes off the bat. And it's Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, Zach Edey's probably going to start, and Clingan, they got to trade Robert Williams so Clingan could get time, because he's obviously massively important to Portland's future. Both of those guys are top 10 picks. The Knicks did not have the ammunition to trade into the top 10, even if they did want one of those guys. You want to talk to me about the kid in Miami who looks pretty good, or who looked pretty good in summer league, or the kid New Orleans ended up getting, who's now, either him or Tice is probably their top center on their depth chart, although they'll wind up starting Zion. Like the guys that you would have thought, okay, maybe like those guys were drafted ahead of where the Knicks picked. So you're talking about moving up, and like a lot of times the price to move up is high. I don't even care about that. The notion that a rookie center is going to come in and contribute at a higher level on your team from day one, having never played NBA basketball before, more than a guy like Precious Achiuwa, who we saw firsthand last year, like step into significant minutes and produce at a fairly high level. I don't, especially when it would have cost you a significant asset probably to try to move up. I don't know that I buy that. And then if you look at the free agent market, so well, there's a couple issues. One, for the Knicks to have gone out and like there were still some balls in the air when a lot of the free agents were going off the board because the Mikal Bridges trade had not been finalized yet. So we didn't even know, were the Knicks going to have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception? Were they going to be hard capped at the first apron? So logistically, I think it was difficult to try to sign someone. But if you look at the centers who went off the board for below the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is like $5.18 million, whatever it is, like, again, I mean, is everybody sitting here like crying because Andre Drummond isn't on this team? I like Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond is a solid center.
Right.
Do I think he's going to be the difference between the Knicks like winning around versus not winning around? Or like, no, I don't. I just like the centers that were out there are just not the ones that are going to change your life. So again, this notion that they stuck their head in the sand and wished blindly that everything was just going to be hunky-dory without facing the facts. That's not how this front office has operated for 4 years. They've never operated like that.
Right.
If they did not make a move, I feel fairly confident in saying it is because whatever opportunities were out there and may still be out there were, from a valuation perspective, not something that was in the team's best short-term interest or long-term interest.
Yeah, I think the notion that the Knicks don't have a plan or don't have a plan here is, I think it's a bit ridiculous. They have a plan. Also, I'm going to still say pump the brakes, guys. It is early September. Okay, it is early mid-September. Excuse me, it's getting late in September. We're early in the part of just starting training camp next week. Things can develop. Things are fluid. I'm sure the team is doing their due diligence and they'll evaluate and see how it goes. So, last thing for me. Speaking of training camp, which starts next week, the Knicks will be going down to Charleston, South Carolina for a couple of days. They kick things off. Then we got some preseason games. I'm sure I'll talk a lot about this on Media Day when I'm there, or Content Day, I believe they like to call it now. I'll show my age, calling it Media Day. What are your thoughts on this Knicks team as they head into training camp, in which I think, J-Mac, this is one of the most exciting seasons, I think, for this fan base, for Knicks fans, in especially all over, but in this New York area that they've seen in a while, where the expectations are high. What are your thoughts on this team as they embark on what is a important training camp and an important season now without Mitchell Robinson? What are your thoughts?
I think they're as well equipped to challenge Boston as any team in the East. A lot could happen. I'm higher. I think Philadelphia, if they're healthy, they're going to be a bear. I think Milwaukee is going to have a comeback season. I could be wrong about that. But the Knicks could beat any of those teams. And, I was lucky enough a few days ago to have, or the pod dropped today, I should say, Bill Bradley on. And obviously Bill Bradley, member of those great Knicks teams in the late 60s and early 70s. He just released a documentary, or not. It's on YouTube. Everybody go watch it. It's called Rolling Along, an American Story. Shameless plug. But in the documentary, and he also told me about this, is that he freely admits, and other members of that Knicks team have said this, there were more talented teams in the league when the Knicks won those championships. But they were the best team. And even with the loss of Mitchell Robinson, I think the Knicks have a chance to be the best team in the league this year in terms of how they play, how together they play, how much they elevate each other's games. I'm excited to see that. I want to see that play out in real time. and I want to see them grow and get better and develop more chemistry. And obviously, they have chemistry going back to the Villanova days now that the whole thing is together. And then just on a small note, because you brought up training camp and media day or content day or whatever the hell they call it, I am curious what answers we get in regards to what may be old news now, but is still interesting to me. And that's the Julius Randle contract situation. Is he? I'm sure he's going to get asked about the fact that he did not sign an extension this summer. I want to hear what his answer is. I wonder if I'm sure other players are going to get asked about it. What do they do to try to make sure that is not an ongoing story to try to deflect that? Because it could be a story if they're not careful. So that's one other thing I'm just curious to see when we get one day.
Nat, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's going to be one of the major questions asked on media day. Where are you on the Knicks with Julius Randle? Do you feel like I don't think he's getting an extension. I never thought he was going to get an extension in the offseason. But do you think this is something, if he starts off the season really well, they should lock him up? Do you think this is something that's going to play into next offseason? What do you think they should do? And my other question, I'm going to throw a question because people have been asking me this question lately, and I'm intrigued as what you think. Sorry for throwing two questions at you.
That's fine.
There's a concern, or it seems for some people to keep asking, well, how do you think Julius Randle is going to fit with this team? Do you have any concern? Yeah, so your reaction is like mine. I don't see the concern here. I'm like, what are we talking about? I don't really see the concern here. So your reaction told me everything I needed to know there. But talk to me about that. If Julius Randle's fit with this team, with Bridges being here, and then also contract situation, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I kind of shrug off the question because Julius Randle cares about winning. He's always been a guy, is he perfect? No. We know his imperfections. He cares about winning. He cares about playing the right way. I think you saw that in his play in January after the OG Anunoby trade.
Yep.
Does that mean that even without Mitch, that there aren't going to be times where maybe the best version of the Knicks, given the guys they have available to them, does not include Julius Randle on the court? I think that's possible. I think there are going to be certain situations, absolutely, where we're like, hey, let's get a little bit more defense in there. Let's get a little bit more shooting in there. I think that's entirely possible. Just because that's the case doesn't mean I question whether Julius is going to be able to fit successfully with this team. If you play Boston, are they going to be able to do some unique things to maybe exploit Julius? Great. Boston is the most well put together team in basketball and maybe one of the most well put together teams we've seen in the NBA in years. So, congratulations. They've done that to a lot of good teams.
Right.
As far as the contract part goes, I don't think he's getting an extension because I think the Knicks feel confident that I don't want to say they have Julius right where they want him, but the market is what the market is. And looking at next summer, only the Nets figure to have significant cap space, and the 20 they have their pick this year, and they will have control of their pick the following year. They will relinquish control of their pick the season after that. So this is a 2-year tanking operation. Now, is it possible Brooklyn turns around and offers Julius a max contract just to spite the Knicks? I mean, anything's possible. Maybe Houston could clear some money. That's a mild concern. But I think the Knicks feel at the end of the day, if Julius Randle goes out and has the best season of his life, and the Knicks are awesome, and he performs in the playoffs, and the Knicks are awesome in the playoffs, and they have to open the checkbook to keep him around long term because some other team might move heaven and earth to try to get him, that is the best possible problem that they could imagine.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, they still will be able to offer the most money. They'll still be able to offer the most years. I don't think there's any rush to do anything. And I think that's why, and credit to your frequent collaborator, Ian Begley, who has kind of reported from the outset,
yep,
the Knicks were in no rush to get an extension done. And that says to me that they're not really afraid of what might happen, which, that says all I need to know.
Yeah, I think it does. I expect this to be a fun season for the Knicks. You and I were talking about this before we started recording. It's about to get really busy for the both of us. As I said, training camp next week. Media day is Monday. Then the team is off to South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, that is. So there will be a lot of content. Please check out my guy, Jonathan Macri, who does a fantastic job with Knicks Film School, all the work that they do. It's about to get real busy. Shout out to the whole team at Knicks Film School. It should be great. Shout out to my guy, Andrew Claudio, who I know is very, very hyped about his New York Mets right now. I'd even text him last night because I didn't want to mess up the vibes. So I didn't do that. He's never had so much blue and orange hype around him. So I know he's excited about that. J-Mac, anything else going on with you guys you want to let the people know or anything coming up?
No, man. Always appreciate you having me on. Excited to get together, I'm sure, a bunch of times throughout the season. Look, I know people are freaking out today with the Mitch news. I get it, which is why I don't want to like put off or like downplay anybody's concerns. But I think the best thing I could say is like look at the reasons why you're concerned, because for the first time we're sitting here as Knicks fans and be like, man, we got it. We got the team. And then this news comes down. It's like, oh man, just when we thought but think about to be in a position where you're like, we have a team that's good enough to win the championship. The second something goes wrong, it's like you're going to be like, woe is me. They still have a whole lot of stuff that's really good and that a lot of other teams would be envious. Is this ideal? No, it's not ideal. But rarely are things ideal. You always have hurdles to overcome when you're trying to win big time in any league. So, they'll be fine. And thank you again, Dex. And yeah, everybody out there, check out Knicks Film School, all the stuff that we do.
Yes.
We always got good stuff around the corner.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Great stuff around the corner. You'll see J-Mac on with me a lot more. J-Mac, I'm hoping to have him in studio for our now annual Knicks season preview. We had a fantastic one last year. And let the people know, I'll have more announcements about this. We'll be doing more of these live shows, trying to bring it to you once a week once the Knicks season starts for a lot of Knicks talk. So J-Mac and other people who cover the Knicks very extensively will be here on the show. J-Mac, I appreciate you pulling up because this was last minute. You coming through. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I think hopefully we gave the people a little bit of therapy. Maybe just, pump the brakes. It's going to be all right. I'm hoping the people can calm down. I get the stress, but it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay.
I've been called a therapist before. So yeah, I'm happy to wear that hat.
Hey,
it fits.
We're out here to help the people. That's all we try to do. That is my guy, Jonathan Macri. I'm Dexter Henry. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live edition of New York Got Game. Everybody have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you